Welcome to the Impact Driven Entrepreneur, the podcast that helps you expand your reach and convert that reach into clients so you can lead your tribe with confidence and create change in the world while living the life you desire. And now your host, certified business coach and consultant, Mariana Ruiz.
Welcome back to the Impact Driven Entrepreneur podcast. Today we have Jeffrey Shaw, the author of Lingo, and we're going to be talking about how to speak better to your audience and how to use this information to scale up your business. So welcome, Jeffrey. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into this specific area of expertise.
Sure. Well, it's kind of a interesting story. So my background is as a photographer, and I still do very little photography, but I have been for 34 years kind of the portrait photographer for very affluent families. Now, my book Lingo, it's actually rooted in how I built that business because I grew up a very lower middle class kid and I wound up photographing the richest people in the United States. And the way I was able to accomplish that is because I understood their lingo. Now, lingo by definition is a jargon, but what I mean to speak someone's lingo is to know them so well that you know their values, their behavior, their lifestyle, and their emotional triggers, right? So to speak someone's lingo, ironically, is speaking to their deepest, most moving, unspoken emotions. You know, it's sort of like what I like to say is that, you know, we've all had the experience where we know someone so well, we know, and as coaches, this is really important, right? How often we need to know what we sense what people need before they know what they need, right? That's what we do. Same thing if, you know, hopefully you've been the lucky recipient of an act of kindness or a gift that made you feel completely seen, heard, and understood. So to speak to someone's lingo, like I said, ironically or paradoxically, is actually speaking to those unspoken emotions where people feel like you completely get them. They feel seen, heard, and understood. And as I often say, they feel like you completely get them. And that's what we need to do as businesses, and that's what we need to do as coaches in order to build a community of people, of like-minded people who understand one another.
That is so powerful. And that is one of the most drivers, right? Is like feeling heard and understood.
Yeah. The crazy thing about this is I get out there and speak about it so much. And I keynote conferences, I do workshops, and it turns conventional business upside down, which I think is what people are craving. You know, the reason why, again, mind you, my background is in creativity, right? Still am a photographer. In the beginning, I worked a lot with, I would coach creatives on their business. But now, I coach people in a huge range and I do a lot of branding consulting. And, creative people, innovative minded people tend to hate the business side, or they will say, I'm sure, Mariana, you've heard people say it, like, oh, I love what I do, I hate the business side. Well, most people hate the business side because they've not been granted permission to do business in a way that's comfortable for them, right? So a lot of what I talk about seemingly turns the world upside down. People are like, oh, wow. I mean, everything I talk about is the opposite of the way traditional business is taught. We can go niche. I completely have a different opinion of what a niche means. But what I find is that when I share my concepts and my ideas, while it's disrupting the norm, people sit back in their chair and think, this is the most natural and comfortable way of being in business. And I'm like, I know, because it's so human. Right? That it is the most, to actually speak to people's emotions, to actually have empathy for people. This is the most human we can be. And guess what? It can work really well in business.
Yes. So can you help us? Let's say we are that person that we're starting to leverage. We aren't sure that lingo, the terminology, the words to use in that one-to-many scale, right? Because there's a part of it that we do feel the pressure, right? Like it has to be the business principles, right? But then how do you do that at scale?
Well, the nice thing about lingo as a concept and how it can help a coach build a business speaking to many is that it is about building a community. So fundamentally, every business needs to understand you are not for everybody, right? So one thing I like to tell people is first of all, let's think about business and marketing entirely different. Let's imagine there is a world of people, like-minded people that share a lingo with you, waiting for you to show up, right? So a quote I use, it's probably my most retweeted quote because it's in all my keynotes. It says, it's not your job to prove your value to anyone. It is your job to find the people who already value what you do. All right. So right there, completely upside down, because we've been told in business we need to sell people, we need to go after a target market. I mean, most of the lingo, most of the literal lingo, the jargon of marketing is horrible, right? We target people, we shove them in a funnel, like it's all horrible lingo. It's a bad energy. Where really the way to build a business, particularly for coaches, is to find the people who already value what you do, people that you share values with, and then build a business that kind of shines like a beacon so that they can find you, right? So you're not selling at people. So I think fundamentally, it's really important to understand there's a world of people waiting for you to show up. And it is your job through good brand messaging and brand image to show up in a way that they can find you. And when you do, you will build a community of like-minded people that share your values. I often say that I have a podcast, I have a private, a closed Facebook group of thousands of people. I have, I've written the book, I've got over 100,000 social media followers. And I say this because I truly believe if I got my whole world of people together in a single room, we'd all like each other. Mm-hmm. And that's powerful. And it's because I've built a community of social media through my podcast, Creative Warriors. I intentionally built a community speaking the lingo of people I want to hang out with and people that I know will share values. And I truly believe if I was able to get them all in one room, they would all like each other. Mm-hmm. And that's what's possible when your lingo throughout history, Mariana, if you look at the history, lingo throughout history has been used to bind communities together, whether it's a culture or a demographic, right? Teenagers have a lingo. Mm-hmm. Right? Presumably so their parents don't know what they're talking about or texting, right? But teenagers have, so lingo, the idea of a shared language based on values and lifestyle and behavior has always existed. So I ask you, why wouldn't any entrepreneur or coach want to know the lingo of the people, the heart lingo of the people they want to build a community with? So it's the perfect way to actually build a business model that speaks to many.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that we can develop to really speak with them, right? In that community?
Yep, exactly. I mean, in my book, Lingo, I actually lay out a 5-step strategy, and I can kind of skim through those 5 steps if you think that would be valuable to you.
Sure, but everyone still go get the book.
Yeah, still go get the book, because there's a lot more depth than the 5 steps, believe me. And by the way, I'll just take a little side trip here, because I know the coaches in your community will really appreciate this, that I had actually written a book the year before and never published. And I decided not to publish the book I wrote the year before because it was very much a self-help book, because I wanted, as I truly think, coaches understand, is that you have to change the person before you can give them tools and strategies. So in wanting to do that, I first wanted to write a self-help book about how to get out of your own way, go beyond your expectations. That was the name of it was Beyond Expectations. I wanted to give that book, and then I was going to write the business book, which would give them strategies. But you got to unblock before you can give the tools. And every professional that I've hired, they looked at and said, but you don't want to end up in the self-help category. Like, that's not who you want to be known for ultimately. You are a business coach. You want to establish that platform. So I surrendered to that and said, okay, the business book needs to be written first. But I kept saying, but the problem with the world is that it takes 3 components to be successful in our business and our lives. It takes strategies, yes, but it also takes unblocking what's in our way, and it takes daily practices to create a positive, abundant flow. And if any one of those pieces are missing, it's why people work really hard but hardly get ahead, the hamster wheel thing. So when I wrote this business book, it is 2/3 of it are business strategies, which I'll share with you in a moment. The last third of the book is all self-help content from the previous book. So it's a very unique business book, right? Because you get these really good strategies. And at the end of the book, I say, hey, now that I've given you all these strategies, now I want to give you some tools and practices to unblock, change your mindsets to unblock what's in your way, and then give you some daily practices, which are quite unique, that you can do every day to create a positive flow, right? So I know the coaching community for which I'm a part of as a trained coach myself, they've loved that aspect of the business book because it's so unique. So the 5 strategies, I say that because I want you to get the book, because I'm only going to give you the strategies today. And I want everyone to also get those other 2 aspects of mindset and practice to really have the full picture. So the 5 steps. And by the way, I'll mention that these steps need to be done in order. And when I say done in order, it doesn't mean you're building your business, but even if you're changing your business brand and image, these need to be done in order, and you'll understand why at the end. So step number 1 is perspective. So you can't speak the lingo of people that you want to be in community with if you don't understand their perspective on the world, right? Which is likely to be very different than your own. You know, it could be an age difference, it could be a cultural difference, it could be a demographic difference, it could be a socioeconomic difference, which was my case as a photographer. But you can't learn to speak their lingo until you walk the proverbial mile in their shoes and understand what the world looks like from their perspective, without judgment and without assumption, right? But let's say you're serving millennials. Well, if you're going to keep walking around and saying millennials are entitled because you haven't taken the time to understand them, then how can you speak their lingo? Because they're not entitled, in my opinion. And they don't actually behave from that. I understand the lingo of millennials. I have 3 of them. And I've spent time to understand where they're coming from. And they're not an entitled generation. I think they're the first generation to have the audacity to not settle. They want it all. Personal fulfillment, a job they love, to see the world. And you know what? They're right. Right? The rest of us have made compromises in our lives, but the millennials are kind of like, hey, you only live once. And while I'm here, it's going to be what I like. I don't call that entitled. I call that ballsy, and good for them. So, right? But if you don't take the time to understand the perspective of people, how are you going to speak their lingo? So that's step number 1. Step number 2, one of the most powerful of all human emotions is familiarity. Familiarity stands out to us, and it also creates a visceral feeling of comfort for us. You go to Europe, you can't not see a Starbucks logo, right? It's so familiar to us. Sometimes we go to, I love the independent coffee shop, but you know what? If I'm traveling, I'm out of town, I'll go to a Starbucks because it's familiar, and there's a comfort in that, right? There's the reason why Thanksgiving exists in the United States, right? And we have the same food, and it's why comfort food exists, because it's familiar. So as an emotional trigger, it's one of the most powerful ones. And it's very important for coaches because it makes you relatable. If you can share your story, if you're the community of people you want to serve, they know that you understand them, that their pain is familiar to you. And you can express that. That creates the bond that coaches need to build their community. Mm-hmm. Step number 3 is style. Style is much more surface level, but very, very powerful, because style is the decision maker. We make decisions every day on whether we think the style of something speaks on our behalf, right? Whether it's the clothes we wear, we want our clothes to make statements for us. So your brand voice and the style of that will also attract the people that you do or don't want in your community. You want to use the one. So let's say, for example, some coaches, I think a big popular thing in coaching right now is badass, right? That's kind of a brand voice, to be badass and aggressive, or, different way. Well, if that's not who you want to attract, then you wouldn't want that to be your brand image, or vice versa. If that is who you want to attract, then you want to create a badass style, right? The font, the layout, the language, the words that you use, it should be badass. Right? Where if your brand voice is much more calming and zen because you reduce stress, and that's your job as a coach, then the style that you put out in the world should feel like that. That's how you're going to attract the like-minded people, right? You have a bunch of lotus flowers and Buddhas on your website, you're not going to attract the badass woman who wants to dominate the world, right? So style is very important. Next is pricing, the actual pricing psychology, because pricing creates a perception. And if you want to be known as, the ultimate coach and really good in your field, if you charge too little, you're going to discredit yourself, right? Or if you, as a coach myself, I support a business model that is not one-off sessions, right? It should be a 6-month contract, a year contract, right? One-off sessions doesn't, to me, what your pricing is really saying is you're not very committed to my outcome, right? Because Of course, I'm not going to come to you when you push my buttons, but yet that's exactly, as a coach, what we need to do is push those buttons and have people committed financially so that they stay through it, so they walk through the fire and get to the other side. So your pricing is very important to create the perceptions. The first thing I ask entrepreneurs when I'm working with them is, how do you want your business and yourself to be perceived? And then we price accordingly. You want to be perceived as, going to stretch somebody, going to get people out of their comfort zone, then your pricing should be uncomfortable for both of you. I tell coaches all the time, your pricing should never be comfortable to either party, you or your client. If it's comfortable for you, then you're not stretching yourself far enough. You should get itchy as hell when you tell people your prices. Like, you want to be out of your own comfort zone, and you want to make sure you get people out of their own comfort zone, because then both parties are stretching. The fifth and final step are the words that you apply, right? Well, how do you speak their lingo? What words will trigger emotions for them? The most powerful of these tools is what I teach in lingo. They're called I just happen to have the book sitting here. I just realized, I just looked over. So here's the book. Yeah. It's also on the wall back there. And so in the book, the most powerful exercise I teach are what are called self-identifying questions. Right. So these are questions that you can pose that are so profoundly deep in understanding your ideal customer. They think to themselves, it must be like she's in my head. How does she know that? How does she know my pain? Right. And that is why, as I said earlier, these 5 steps need to be done in order. And yet everybody goes into business upside down. Right. What happens when most people go into business or start a coaching practice? They are so excited to design a logo. They have a business card made. They launch a pretty website and fill it up with words. And then they wonder why they're not getting enough customers, or they're not getting the clients that are a fit for them, right? Because you haven't taken the time to understand their perspective, what feels familiar to them, create it in a style that resonates for them, align yourself with them by your pricing structure, and then speak to them, speak their lingo with the words that you use. Every business art history has been built upside down. But the nice thing is you can always stop and say, well, how do I now speak the lingo? Let me go back and more deeply understand their perspective, familiarity, style, pricing strategy, and then rebrand so that you're speaking the lingo of the community, your ideal clients, the community of people that you want to bring into your coaching circle.
Wow, that is so powerful.
That's a lot of content in a really short period of time.
Wow. Super powerful.
Good.
So tell us, someone's going to walk away, they're going to go buy the book, and they're going to start implementing the blockers, right? And working through the blockers, right? And so you say everything has to be done with progression. Mm-hmm. What if somebody is in that process of, let's say they're going to rebrand? They start all the way at the beginning mm-hmm. and move all the way up, and you can't go backwards. Is that right?
Well, I mean, this is what I do professionally. So what I do every day is I help entrepreneurs, businesses, and I do work with a lot of coaches. I help people every day kind of rebrand, right? Mm-hmm. Because they look at their existing, and often people come to me and say, well, I'm just getting ready to do a website, and I stop them. I'm like, well, stop, because I can almost assure you that it won't be right. So for example, I'll jump ahead a little bit. The gift I have for your audience is a gift I love to give on not all podcasts, but certain podcasts. And since you're an audience of coaches, like, this is perfect for me. And my gift to you that I'll offer you at the end is an opportunity for me to do a quick review of your website. So what I have people do, and your audience is welcome to do, is they fill out an application. It takes like 2 or 3 minutes with very particular questions about who they think their ideal audience is and what they're trying to say. So they fill that out. So now I have, they've told me what they expect, and then I go to their website, right? And I will tell you, I recently, the last 2 weeks, I reviewed 100 websites. 98 out of 100, I was able to write back and give them 2 to 3 tips on what needed to be changed. 98 out of 100. So nobody really has this right. Mm-hmm. And the reason they don't have it right, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. One is that you have to understand the nature of websites has dramatically changed in the last few years, and that they're all templates. Yeah. Right? Because they're templates, which is a wonderful opportunity. It's cheaper. We can get into the back end dashboards. It's great. The problem is that there's a fine line between template and generic. right? So because they're templates, we have to work that much harder to create an emotional feeling website. The other practical reason this is a big issue is that more than 70% of viewers to your website are on a mobile device. People on mobile devices don't change pages, right? So your initial, what I call front-facing branding, your lingo, that initial impression that people get in under 10 seconds needs to let the world know what you stand for, whom you stand up for, and do it in a way that's so compelling they want to contact you. And you have to do that on your homepage, because more than 70% of people that are on your website don't even go to interior pages, which is where a lot of people have their best stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's why this has become such a big issue, because the market's noisier, people have less attention, and your most powerful messages need to be presented so quickly on your homepage. So as I said, 98 out of 100 websites I reviewed recently had room for improvement. So this is, every business can benefit from just saying, well, let me rebrand. It doesn't mean rebrand, it doesn't mean you have to redo your logo. It really is just rebuilding the message that you're putting out there. And then the result of that, people say, wow, suddenly I'm getting more clients, I'm closing more deals, and I love every one of my clients because they're a good fit for me. They're no longer asking me for discounts, and they value who you are and what you do. It's easier to work with.
Yeah, 100%. I did a big rebrand and remessaging about a year ago, and that was the best part, is who I got to help on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually stepping into my own zone of genius.
It's just, and what I love, Mariana, is the process as I work with clients. We're working on their website, their brand message, and their brand imaging. But the most beautiful thing is seeing how the clarity that comes to them brings them more peace and more confidence. Right? So they're behaving better and differently on the phone, at cocktail parties, because they've built the lingo. They're more clear on their message. They're more clear on who their ideal client is, so they can more clearly identify who they're a fit for. And it brings in more business. It manifests more business because of your own clarity, and you're able to communicate it better to others. So in the end, the website is an important and valuable asset in our businesses today, but it winds up just being a tool to get to inner clarity that I think more than anything helps people move their business forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how concrete your own message is, right? Like, as you're teaching, everything you teach is so concrete and so well communicated. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, you can't write a book called Lingo and not honor it. But believe me, it hasn't always been this way. And hey, I'll tell you, I'll give you a quick example. So I did a TEDx talk earlier this year. And I'm very open about it. It's my 13th application, right? Some people get a TEDx first time, second time, 13th. And the reason it took me 13 times is because it was a complex message I wanted to put out there. And in my heart and soul, I knew the message, but boy, I did a terrible job communicating it in the applications. And it took me 13 times to get better and better at clarifying the message, till finally, when I submitted, I knew I was going to get that one. I was like, holy crap, I get it. Right? It was clearer than it ever had been, but it took me 13 applications to just get better and better and better at clarifying the message. And the TEDx talk was called Validation Paradox. And there's a chapter in the book that is about that as well. Again, you wouldn't think it would be in a business book, but if you read it or see the TEDx talk, you'll understand how it's part of the advantage. In the TEDx talk, I talk about that others can almost always people can see more in us than we can see ourselves, right? Because we've already predetermined our own expectations, but often other people can see more in us. And that is the greatest benefit of working with your ideal customers. When you work with people who already value what you do, they will bring out levels of greatness in yourself that you didn't even see. Right? Because if you get down to the root of the word mastermind, which your coaching community understands, because you're talking about group coaching, the whole idea of a mastermind is that the third brain that's created, right? What's the value that's created, it's greater than the individuals. Well, that's exactly what happens when you work and serve with your ideal customers. When you're coaching people who are such a good fit for you, together you create something that neither of you on your own could have created. And that to me is the greatest reason why we want to work with people who are a perfect fit.
Yes, that's so good. And thank you for sharing that, because that's a lot of how I show up, is just sharing my stumbles and and I think it's so important because, so many people could be discouraged by that, number of applications, and you just kept going, and it, you know what, it made your message so much better, and it just rose you up to a next level. So I think that's a beautiful story.
Yeah,
thank you.
In the book, there's another chapter called Reciprocal Communication. This is part of the self-help part. And reciprocal communication is a word I made up, terminology I made up, but it's about recognizing, does what you want you as much in return, right? Because we can chase goals that the universe is not ready for us to have yet. As much we might think we're so ready for. I felt absolutely ready for that TEDx talk for years, 2 years. But looking back, the universe didn't think I was ready. The message wasn't ready. I was in a relationship that was dysfunctional, to say the least. And I'm sure that would have greatly affected my memory of that time. So it waited, the universe waited till that relationship was over, till I got clearer on my message. And when I got it, this is the true reward of it all. I moved to Miami 3 years ago. I'm from Manhattan. When the TEDx talk I got was in Manhattan, back at home for me, and all 3 of my kids were able to be in the audience without even getting on a plane because they all still live there. So there was every reason to believe that the universe was holding out for me to get it right. And when I did, I was greatly rewarded with the best TEDx talk I could have asked for.
Yes, that is a powerful manifestation. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. So where can people follow you? You have a podcast and some other resources, so share those with us. Yeah,
so sure. I would say, the gift that I want to give you, because honestly, if you go for the review, what they call Lingo Review, if you go there, we'll be connected and you'll find me everywhere else. But so you would go to jeffreyshaw.com, that's JEFFREY, Shaw, SHAW.com /impact driven. It's a page that we've made for your audience which will give you the opportunity for me to do a quick review of your website, email you back with some suggestions that you can. So it's just really been wonderful. So I take a look at your website, give you a few tips back. So start there, grab that gift, because in our communications are all my links to all my social media, my closed Facebook group, my podcast, Creative Warriors. So if you start with a gift, because we're going to build a relationship, everything else will unfold for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Head on over to impactdrivenentrepreneur.com, where you can find an arsenal of videos, blog posts, and previous podcast episodes to help you increase your profit and impact. Again, impactdrivenentrepreneur.com, and click on blog. Enjoy.